welcome back once again, friends of Gen Con. We've been streaming all sorts of amazing things today, and we have another awesome project that I'm so excited to talk about. I'm joined here by Justin, RPG producer for Atlas Games, and Jonathan, award-winning game designer. And we're going to talk about some of the Atlas Games stuff and also Over the Edge, this RPG game that we have here. So, Justin, how about you tell me a little bit about Atlas Games? Some of our fans might be well aware of your company, some not so much, so give me the high level.
Absolutely. So Atlas Games has been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
They've been around since the 80s. They started out as a role-playing game company up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Actually in Northfield, Minnesota. A little small town south of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
They eventually moved to the big town.
Yeah. So very long winters, right?
Yes, very long winters, and very little to do other than to roll dice and play role-playing games.
Yeah.
Which is what John Nephew, who founded the company, was doing. And so he published a number of independently licensed supplements for games like Ars Magica and the like.
Okay.
And then one day he came along and said he came across Jonathan's lovely game Over the Edge. And said, I need to publish this.
Yeah.
And so that's when he really made a big push into publishing games. And
Okay.
since then he published it Over the Edge and Feng Shui 2 and Unknown Armies, and he actually now has the rights for Ars Magica. We publish Ars Magica. We have the 5th edition of Ars
wow.
Magica.
Yeah.
The game, the Atlas also then moved into board games and card games. They do Gloom and Once Upon a Time, and really any place that people are, I guess, hiding out from the winter
Yes.
and spending time with each other in front of a warm fire with friends, family, and a good fun game with a narrative twist. That's where Atlas Games is at.
All right, excellent. And so you mentioned picking up Over the Edge. When was that it was first?
Well, Jonathan would be able to
picked
speak
up?
to that more than me. He was there.
He was there when it happened. All right, Jonathan, let's talk a little bit about your background,
Sure.
about your history, and about the game and that relationship.
That's right. So I've been doing role-playing games since 1987.
Okay.
So that's when Mark Reinhagen and I released Ars Magica. Right?
Okay.
We self-published. We were one of the first people to have a Macintosh with PageMaker so that we could
Ooh,
exactly
fancy.
right. we learned what WYSIWYG was,
Yes,
right?
right.
So that was
Right.
really exciting. I did all the layout for Ars Magica, but back in the day, we literally would cut out the art and tape it in
Okay.
to the pieces of paper. Like we could print the text out, but we didn't have any way of putting the art in other than manually. So it was sort of a hybrid project at that point.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old print typesetting
Yes.
for the old printers, right?
Yeah, that's right. We just barely missed that,
Yeah.
right? And we were able
Yeah.
to at least
New technology.
new
Yeah.
technology was pretty exciting. Yeah, we had a Macintosh SE with a 20 meg hard drive
Oof.
that I paid $3,400 for.
Ooh, yeah.
Totally worth. I mean, then it's $1987.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Ooh.
Yeah, but totally worth it
Yeah.
because that's what let us do desktop publishing and create these professional-looking games, kind of out of our little basement apartment.
Yeah, and that's really impressive. I mean, nowadays people are so used to self-publishing and Kickstarter and print on demand, but back then
That's
it was
right.
a different world.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So we did Ars Magica. That's a game about wizards in the Middle Ages, and
Okay.
like Justin said, it's still going. Now Atlas has it,
Okay.
and it was successful enough to sort of launch my career and launch Mark Reinhagen's career. He went on to do Vampire. And what I did when we split up, and we don't need to talk about exactly what happened,
Yeah.
but what I wanted to do was create an unpublishable game. So I'd been working for years on games for publication,
Yeah.
which had to, you have to have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and you have to create something that's for an audience, and
Yeah,
you
a
want
product.
a product,
Yeah.
right? For someone who isn't necessarily you.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, now that I'm not in the game industry anymore, I can take everything I know about creating role-playing games and I can do something just for my friends and me.
Okay. Yeah.
Something that would be too weird and too free-form to ever be publishable. And so that's where this campaign started. It was just a homebrew campaign for my friends and me.
Yeah.
So I'd actually been inspired by Robin Laws to look into the works of William S. Burroughs, and that's sort of the thing that made it click and helped me get this weird game off the ground. So that was back around 1990, and when John Nephew heard about the game, he said he wanted to publish it.
Publish the unpublishable game.
I said, maybe you don't want to publish it, right? Like you don't understand what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
But he kind of has an artistic spirit. He really wanted to do sort of the game that nobody else would do. And so that's how we ended up with a game that if I had been doing it for a publication, I would never have done it this way.
So do you want to speak just briefly
Yeah.
about, like, when you say unpublishable, like what
Sure.
about it is it that makes it different or weird or artistic?
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, the setting is this weird fictional island, a la Maja, where like all the conspiracies you can think of are true, but weirder. And so people wear nooses instead of neckties. There's a district in the city that's patrolled not by the police, but people with baboons on leashes.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of weird.
Yeah.
And you know, there's space aliens and psychic powers and mutants and you know so the whole idea was I wanted to be able to say to somebody, hey, come join my game, make up whatever kind of character you want.
Yeah.
And then you don't need to know about the setting
Yeah.
because you're going to take an airplane and land there, and if you don't know anything about it, that's fine. You'll
Yeah.
learn about it as you walk around, right? And you don't need to know about the background because the background is the modern day. It's the
Yeah.
real world. So that means you can bring in all the stuff that you find interesting about the real world, whether it's politics or religion or history or, you know, cryptids or whatever it is that you're interested in, and you can make that part of your character or part of your character's background. And that worked really well. Like even today, you know, I show people the list. Like these are the sorts of traits that other people have made up, and you can pick from these lists if you want, but you can also just make up the stuff that you want.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the guys in my last game, he decided that his main trait was he was a post-mortem lawyer. So he was the one who would argue on behalf of dead clients and try to keep them out of the worst hells.
Oh,
Right,
yeah,
exactly,
nice.
and try to get them into maybe the not so bad hells, or maybe maybe limbo, right? If you get the right judge on the right day.
Yeah,
Right. Well, I had never seen that in a game before,
Yeah.
right? And all the time I've been playing this, but people keep coming up with these really new, these new ideas for their characters, and that was the idea. I wanted people to be able to just let their imaginations go and do fun and interesting stuff.
Can I pitch one? Yeah. What about like because I want to see how weird. You
Yeah.
know, like what about a goth fairy who runs like a really gloomy bakery, but for forest creatures, where you like bake up little acorn treats and stuff for them.
That seems great. One of the things that I've learned from like Vincent Baker in Apocalypse World
Yeah.
is that you want to have human content
Okay.
so that you can relate to it,
Yeah.
right? Like that's kind of what narrative is about,
Yeah.
right? And so I would say that's fine as long as you're human enough
Yeah.
that you have human-like feelings and people can relate to you as a human.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the characters in the scenario that I improvised, she invented that she was a baker who could bake these magical
Yeah.
treats, and mostly they were for like good things and making people happy. And
Yeah.
of course, during the scenario,
Yeah.
I had one of the non-player characters talk her into, for the first time, using her powers for evil instead
Ooh,
of goodness,
yeah.
right? And again, that's what's interesting about using the modern day is that people can bring in whatever they want, whether it's goss or bakery or whatever, and the challenges and the moral quandaries that people get put in, everyone can relate to.
Yes, yeah. I have to say right off the bat is I think a lot of games, when you're approaching them or when someone's pitching, like, oh, we could play this game, it's very mechanical.
Yep.
You know, you're talking about what you'll be doing
That's
in
right.
the game. But you just painted a story. Like
That's
you told
right.
me a story with a post-mortem lawyer and the different
Yes.
levels of hell. Like I want to hear that story. I want to watch that TV show.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and the best part is when you take the goth baker fairy and the postmortem lawyer and
Yeah.
you put them into the same group, and then you see what happens when they start working
That's right.
together.
Yeah, and they have kind of a built-in backstory, because I
That's right.
imagine you have your characters then, and then create a situation where they're together or a
That's right.
party.
That's
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you're creating your character, you are sort of creating a little bit of background, right?
Okay.
Because until this guy created his character, I didn't know that there were post-mortem lawyers doing that.
Okay.
I wasn't even sure what the afterlife was like.
Yeah.
But for the scenario that we ran, he was defining what the afterlife is like so that it would fit his character.
Okay.
I was like, we all ran with that,
Yeah.
right? And then, it came into play when a crocodile-headed spirit came to get him because, he had screwed over the wrong otherworld deity in some past deal or whatever, and he had to face it down, right? So it allowed me to bring in stuff that I never would have invented because I was riffing off what he had created, and then that became part of the world.
Okay. So let's we mentioned story versus mechanics. Let's
Sure.
dig into the mechanical foundry for this.
Sure,
Like,
exactly. So what's really nice about this is I was able to take all the ideas that like indie games have propagated, all the new ways of approaching conflict resolution and that sort of thing, and use them in the new game. So Over the Edge back in '92, it inspired a lot of people like Ron Edwards to think about things in a new way and to break new ground in terms of how you can design games and how you can design conflict systems. And then I learned from them.
Yeah.
Was able to put that all back into here.
Yeah.
And so the '92 system was very freeform and very flexible, and it was rules light, but you still basically rolled initiative and made an attack roll and made a defense roll and subtracted the difference, and then that was how much damage you did, and that came off hit points. And so while it was flexible, it still had this round by round structure that you would be familiar with from Dungeons and Dragons or any game like that. Well, the new system, almost all conflicts can be resolved with a single throw of the dice.
Okay.
Right? So when you start play, you pick 2 dice to be, we call them your lots. Right? You cast your lots.
I
right?
love that, yeah.
Well, so when you're in a role-playing game and you roll your dice, it is sort of like divining the future, because what comes up does tell you what's going to happen immediately in your future, right? It's the one kind of divination that actually is true. And so...
I never thought about that, but yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And so I play that up, and you cast your lots, and that determines your lot, your fate, your portion. And for almost any conflict, you'll use one cast, and if you're taking the initiative, you try to get a 7 or better to succeed. If you're resisting something, you need an 8 or better. So there's sort of a reward for taking the initiative and being the person who's starting things in action. Right? And then, in addition, if either of your dice comes up a 4, that's what we call a good twist. Okay,
lucky
and so
4,
lucky 4, and if it's a 3, it's a bad twist. And so what that does is, in addition to giving you this binary result like win, lose, succeed, fail, you also get something unsurprising, something sort of tangential or perpendicular to that result. It can be either for the good or for the bad.
Okay.
And it's possible to roll a 4, but still roll too low on your other die that you lose. And it's possible to roll a 3 and get high enough on your other die that you succeed.
Yeah.
So you can succeed, but something bad happens. And so, like a good example might be if some evil magic is being used against you and you fail to resist it, but you roll a 4, right? Maybe that 4 means, okay, you failed to resist it, but in being exposed to it, you've learned something about it that you are going to be able to use later in the game. And likewise, it's possible to succeed at something but fail, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you might successfully win the fight or whatever, but you lose something important in the process, or you make a bad impression on the people who are watching because you won the fight so brutally that now everybody's kind of turned off by you. Right? And that's not part of the win-lose result. That's some other thing that's kind of coming in out of left field. And usually a narrative element about how people react to you, or what complication comes that you're going to have to face. Right?
My favorite are twist ties, where the dice have both a 4 and a 3 on them, and both sorts of twists happen.
Yeah, that's right. Good and bad.
Yeah.
That's right. So to make it a little more simulationist, sometimes the things that you're trying to do are easy, right? Sometimes it's harder. And so you have a level that indicates sort of how elite your character is, right? Are you a competent level, expert, elite, world class? And every challenge that you go up against, whether it's another person or just the environment, that also is going to have a level, right? And so if you're evenly matched, you just roll the dice and you take what you get. But if you have the advantage, then you get to re-roll one of the 2 dice.
Okay. Yeah.
If you want to.
Yeah.
And if you are at a disadvantage, then as the game master, I get to make you re-roll one of those
Evil,
dice.
yeah.
It's kind of interesting because sometimes there'll be like you rolled a 6 and a 4, which are good in different ways. And now do I make you re-roll the 6 and hope you roll low and fail, but then you'll keep that good twist?
Yeah.
Or do I make you re-roll the good twist so that, okay, you'll probably succeed, but at least you're not going to get whatever the big bonus is, right? There's a little bit of play there.
Yeah.
And then the final thing that sort of wraps up the whole mechanic system is that if you roll doubles, you give the group karma.
Oh.
Which basically means good luck.
Oh, nice,
right?
yeah.
And that means anybody later on in the session can spend that karma to re-roll one of the 2 dice that they have just rolled.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
And so, and you kind of want to use that karma because if someone else rolls doubles again, you can't bank karma twice.
Yeah. He
And
double karma.
right? And so, if you have karma and you roll doubles, you feel like, oh, I wish someone had used that karma up
Yeah.
again so that we could re-up it.
Yeah.
And that's really about it. Now that's all you need for whether it's combat or surveillance or persuasion or dealing with magic or any sort of thing. The other important thing is, it's sort of like in a movie, what the audience wants to know is what's the result of this decision that the characters make, right? So if the character decides to break into a home to look for clues, they don't need to know every little thing that happens.
Yeah.
What we want to know is, do you find the thing that you're
Yeah,
looking
do you find
for?
it?
Do you get caught? Right.
Yeah.
That's what's important. And so you can resolve a whole breaking and entering an investigation on a single throw of the dice, right? Where you might get. What happened to one of my players is, yes, you succeeded, but you got the bad twist.
Yeah.
So you found the thing that you were looking for, but the hidden surveillance cameras also found you, and so you don't realize this, but now you have given yourself away.
Yeah.
Right? You succeeded, but something bad happened.
Yeah. And did they know about the camera or?
So that's a really good point. Hitchcock said the audience should know
Yeah.
what the characters don't.
Yes, exactly.
Well, in a role-playing game, the players are the audience.
Yes, yeah.
So I coach the game master in here to actually give some information away so that the players can appreciate the tension at the table even if their characters don't.
Yeah.
Right? So like I might say at the beginning of a scenario, and one thing that all your characters don't know is there's an astral vampire somewhere in this scenario, and it's really going to be dangerous, and you might not recognize it until it's too late.
Yeah.
So now all the players know, okay, something's going on, but the characters are clueless.
Yeah.
Right? And it's sort of like the bit in a movie where the audience gets to see something's happening. This
Yeah.
is weird,
The murder in the closet.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and the characters don't know it yet.
Yes. That's interesting. I feel like that conversation has come up a lot recently in the industry about dramatic irony.
That's right.
And how people, I think a lot of players kind of, if there's a secret that they tune out, or they're like, oh, I don't want to know
Yeah.
because my character was like, well, you can separate the two of
That's
them.
right.
And so it's like you know that this vampire is around, your character doesn't know, and
That's
playing
right.
that out, but it does kind of lead you, and if you don't have any information, you can feel a little bit lost, and you don't have
That's right.
that tension.
That's right. And when I played it back in '92, I played it sort of the standard way, right?
Yeah.
And I knew a whole bunch of secrets, and I had a bunch
Yeah.
of stuff written down.
Right.
And the players were wandering around, and it's like, what are those weird guys with like the red rectangle on their forehead?
Yeah.
Is that something important? We don't know.
Yeah.
And if they didn't know what was going on, it was hard for them to know how to react emotionally, and it was hard for them just to know, are we getting closer? Is this
Yeah.
a red herring? Does this mean anything? And so I kind of have now come down on the side of, when in doubt, let people know. Like, I'm not going to tell you who the astral vampire is necessarily,
Yeah.
but I want you to know that there is one, so
Yeah.
that every time your character meets a non-player character, it's like, well, what do they mean by that?
Yeah.
Do they really like me, or is this the astral vampire?
Yes.
Right?
Trying to trick me.
Right, and that dramatic irony is really important, and in fact, it's built into character creation.
Okay, excellent. I was going to ask about that.
All right. So, in the '92 version, things were there was a lot of narrative that you could make up, but your character stats were kind of procedural. For example, you had traits that could let you do things, and then you had a flaw that kept you from doing things. And then you had like a motive that would go make you want to do something. So I've sort of mixed that up. You still have traits that let you accomplish things, but instead of a flaw, you have a trouble. And that is, what is the fun kind of trouble that you as a player and everyone else at the table want to see your character get into?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So are you the one you are too curious for your own good? So, so when your character wanders off following something that's sort of interesting but dangerous, the other players don't say, don't do that, that's stupid. They're like, oh, there she goes again. We know that this is her trouble. This is the kind of trouble that she gets into. And then your question mark is an even more subtle element. This is an element of the character. It's part of your character's persona. It might be part of their self-understanding, but it's an element that's going to come into question during play. So traditionally, if you have a character that has the trait honorable, right, it means that you sort of are expected to play your character honorably at every turn.
Yeah.
And if you do something dishonorable, then you're playing out a character, and maybe you're cheating, and maybe you're, making people not believe in your character anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Well, people, especially in fiction, they are more interesting than that.
Exactly.
So if you have your question mark as honorable, it's honorable?
Question mark?
Question mark?
Inflection?
And so you present yourself as honorable, and maybe you think of yourself as honorable, but everyone at the table knows that this is the characteristic that is going to be challenged during play. And if you're honorable the whole time and you make sacrifices to be honorable, then everyone's like, yeah, all right, she's honorable. That's part of the fun of this, to watching her deal with that. But if it comes to a point where you're like, no, I think I'm going to betray my friends for this, then that's also in character.
Yeah.
No one can say, oh, wait a minute, you're honorable, because it's your question mark. And what that means is, when the game master brings you a challenge that questions your honor, everyone at the table is like, what's she going to do? What's she going to do? Is this the time where she's going to turn?
Well, and this is my favorite part of this, too, is that, as Jonathan says in the book, you don't predefine what the breaking point is for the character, right?
That's right.
You have to discover that during play because it's more interesting that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it gives you a degree of freedom. Instead of, I have to play this character in this way, it's, well, this is the pivot. This is the place where I get to pick which way it goes. Usually it's a good thing where you might slip up and be bad, right? Like I'm confident, or I'm brave, or I'm sane. Sane? Right? But I kind of like the negative ones too, right? Like the mysterious coffin dealer that somebody created, right? And she knows there's something else in those coffins that she's trading around, but she doesn't want to think about it because she's hard-hearted, right? It's all business. Hard-hearted. And so everybody knows, okay, you're going to play your character hard-hearted, but at some point, something's going to touch you, right?
Yeah.
Something's going to, and then that is sweet when it's like the tough guy is like, oh, but we have to help the kitty, right?
Obviously.
Or whatever it is, right? And then again, the players are looking at this player like, when are they going to break? When are they going to show their human side? And they're waiting for that to happen. And that's sort of the dramatic irony is that the character thinks they're hard-hearted.
Yeah.
The character is not doesn't think, well, I wonder if today's the day that I turn soft, right? But the player is. And it's that distance that lets you sort of really get your characters into weird situations that drive home their internal conflicts, or like where they're going to go in the future.
Yeah. To say, if I was playing the lawyer, the
postmortem lawyer,
lawyer, I wouldn't want my trouble to be technicalities.
Okay.
So just like, getting off and like being really smug about it. So all those like very powerful underground like water gods of the dead,
That's right?
And be like, oh, well, you signed in like water ink and it washed off, so contract is null.
Yeah, that's right.
And then like wink.
Yeah, that's right. Now I guess maybe it's your soul we're going to have to come and take, you know? Yeah.
And of course that would be a trouble because all of them would be gunning for like plotting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then when something bad happens to this guy and it sort of screws up the player's plans, well, that's what drama is all about, is your plans going awry, right? If the heist always went off as planned, who would watch the movie?
Yeah. So you mentioned modernization. We didn't really touch on this yet. So it was published in 92?
Published in 92.
All right. And this is the new version.
This is, that's right, June. Yeah,
okay.
June 2019.
Nice.
Yeah.
And this is the second one, so it was published over the intermediaries?
This is the third one. The second one was a pretty minor update, right?
Okay.
It was really, the first edition with more stuff.
Okay.
So this is really the first time that I've come back to it and redone it. And in fact, the person who helped me with this, Chris Lights, he came to me years ago and said, hey, if you ever want to do another edition of Over the Edge, I'm a big fan and I would love to work on it, and I've been doing game design work and I think it would be great.
Yeah.
And my response to him was, sort of like my response to John Nephew when he wanted to publish it,
Yeah.
my response was, I'm never going to do another edition of that game.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to do another edition of that game.
Yeah.
Because the original game, I created it with the idea I was never going to publish it.
Right,
Well, I can't do that again.
Yeah.
I can't fool myself into thinking that I'm not going to publish it.
Right,
So
right.
how do you revise the unpublishable game, right? And that first edition had this amazing freshness and originality and openness.
Yeah.
Because it was coming out of left field. It was not the game that I would have done if I had known I was going to publish it.
Yeah.
And how do you do a second edition? Well, 25 years later, here's what are their kids doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
right? And the whole point of the setting is that because it's the modern day and because anything goes, you can do whatever you want with it. And I could write whatever, like, oh, what's the hospital going to be like? Hospital can be like anything.
Yeah.
What's the university going to be like? It could be like anything. And I could just do that over and over again. Well, if you're doing 25 years later and you're trying to be true to all this canon and whatever, not to mention the supplements that have been published or whatever,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like,
great.
it's not the same game, right? So I guess he put that idea in my head, and eventually I thought of it as my idea, and then I liked it.
As one does,
As
right?
one
You
does.
plant that seed. It's like,
Hey.
oh, your idea that you had, it's like, did I come up with that idea? I guess I did, yeah.
Now that it's my idea, I
Yeah.
think I can. So what I decided was, if I rewrote the setting,
Yeah.
not update it, not be a slave to the canon, and just be like, okay, knowing what I know now as a much more established game designer, what would I put into this game and what would it look like? So you have the same basic ideas, it's the same city sort of, and you've got the same major characters are still there with their proper names,
Yeah.
but they're all recast, they're all spun in a new way. And I wrote it without going back to the original and making sure I was getting everything right. It was just like, I'm gonna
You rewrote it
do
from
my
scratch.
thing. So I rewrote
Oh, wow.
from scratch
From
based on
memory.
what I had in my head.
Wow.
Like I remember what I did before with
Yeah.
Dr. Fürchtegott Nussbaum, the creepy doctor. Well, now I've got another version of him that plays on some of the same themes, but is totally different.
Yeah.
Right? So the people who love the old version get to see new versions of everything that they loved before, and the people who are new to the game have what the people in the original game had, which was an all-new setting of stuff that people have never seen before, that was created just because it was cool and not
Yeah.
because it was in line with any sort of canon.
Right.
And then I did the same thing with the mechanics, like we talked about before.
Yes.
Right? Like
Modernized.
modernize them and not just tweak them, not just improve them, but like throw out what I did before
Yeah.
and start with this new system. So the old one was like, if you're good at something, you roll 3 dice, and if you're average, you roll 2, and if you're really good, you roll 4, and you add all the dice together, and you see how high you get, and you roll dice against each other. And if you have an advantage, you roll an extra die, but then you drop out the lowest. And it was all this kind of it was simple, but it was simulationist.
Yeah.
Right? And now it's like, these are your lots.
Yeah.
These 2 dice will determine your success and failure for the entirety of the game. You can't put them aside. If they screw you, you have to keep using them. And every time you roll, it's like, what did they do to you last time?
Yeah.
What will they do to you now? And you roll those 2 dice.
Yeah.
Going back for a second and talking about that idea of letting new and old players both find the island again, to go back to the island you only thought you knew. It's one of my favorite things about the book. And you actually have a whole section in there of really amazing ideas, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Where as we all pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
But a really
I love
amazing.
this.
And to be fair, like I was not actually involved in the production of this
That's right.
book. I joined Atlas in December.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was my predecessor Cam Banks who worked with Jonathan
That's right.
and Chris and made this book what it is. So I can gush about it with
Yeah.
only a
With
minimal amount of bias.
impunity. Yeah.
But there's this really amazing chapter in the book that Jonathan goes into where he just has all these cool big ideas that GMs can add to their island that will completely transform the island. I'm not going to mention anything because like players should be surprised by them. They're designed to be surprises. But they're things that will completely transform the island. So even if you have played in an Over the Edge 3rd edition campaign before,
That's
you
right.
can still go back and have a whole new island, and you can go back to the same GM's game 6 stories later, and will be a whole new island again. And one of the things I love about it is that gives such permission to the GM.
That's right.
And it's given us, and I, now that I'm coming in to develop new supplements for the game,
Yeah.
such an opportunity to say, well, no, the spirit of the game is to completely transform everything. There are no sacred cows. There is nothing that can't be touched. There is nothing that is sacrosanct. You can go in, whether you're an individual GM or a player creating a character and writing the background elements, or the guy who inherits this and has the honor of inheriting it and being able to do really cool new things with it. Whoever you are on that spectrum, you have permission and you are encouraged and you are excited to go into this world and completely mess it up.
That's right.
Stomp it into the ground and rebuild it from the ashes.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, yeah. No.
So on that topic, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Cam Banks, right? He was the producer on it, and he was a big fan of the original, right? So he really loved it, and he was able to love this new version and bring it all together. And so we're all really grateful for him and for what he did. And the point that Justin was making about how you change things, right? One of the ways that I made that inevitable for the Game Master is I took stuff that was in the original version. It was your standard sort of background content, like here is the Museum of Modern Life, and this is its address, and this is what's in it, right? And that's kind of how you did content back in the day, right? And most of the content is like that. Like here are these cool businesses or these cool cults or shrines or gangs or whatever. But I took things like the Museum of Modern Life and I put it in the Game Master section and said, this is something that's going to come to life in your campaign. This is not something that is already there and everybody knows about it and you can look it up. This is something that some crazy millionaire is putting together, and maybe you, if you're an artist or maybe a scientist or something, maybe you get tapped to do an exhibit in the opening of the Museum of Modern Life. Or maybe you run a whole story arc on you are all the characters who are related to this museum, whether you're the guards or the artists or the managers or whatever, and you're trying to make it happen. But the Museum of Modern Life becomes a verb instead of a noun. It's a thing that exactly is going to happen in the campaign, and how it happens is going to be determined by what the Game Master sets out to do, and that's riffing off what the players have brought to the table.
And is that something they can create together then?
Yeah. So, for example, you can eat just like I said, how the postmortem lawyer sort of brings something to the background just by virtue of what he does.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we're going to do a story arc that's about the Museum of Modern Life, then you can come up with character concepts that sort of inform that, right? Like, these people think I'm just one of the security guards, but really I'm the second cousin of the business partner that the patron screwed over 10 years ago, and I've got sort of my own reasons for being here. And now suddenly, there was a business partner that this guy screwed over 10 years ago that's not in the book, but it's now part of the story, right? And so then just by creating your characters, you would give some sort of shape or some sort of tenor to the museum.
So let's go back in time a little bit. So launched in 92, and the environment was very different back then.
That's right.
So what was the reaction to this unpublishable, published game?
A lot of people who went on to do really interesting things were really jazzed by it. I think it was it wasn't a big hit in terms of numbers. It was worth doing a second edition for, so it was at least that successful, and there was a long line of products. And there was a fanzine for it, so it had that kind of support. But Atlas Games, it was their first role-playing game, and they were not well established yet. And it's a pretty odd game, not like the other games that are out there, right? It didn't have classes and levels and magic items and all the kind of stuff that people sort of expected. But one of my friends says it's sort of like the Velvet Underground in that not a whole lot of people bought it, but many of the people that bought it went on to design their own role-playing games.
Yeah. Oh.
Because since the whole idea is, hey, I'm going to get you to use your creativity to do this in your own way, then, well, once you have done that, you see how much power you have and how much you can alter what you do at that table. And so, yeah, it had a big influence on people like Ron Edwards, and he went on to form The Forge, and he did a slew of indie role-playing games that I learned from, like Sorcerer. It's a big influence on Vincent Baker, and then, right, Jason Morningstar,
Yeah,
right, did
absolutely.
Fiasco. It's a big influence on me now, and Vincent Baker's work was a big influence. So in Apocalypse World, you roll 2 dice whenever you do something.
Right.
It is sort of like in a fight, for example, it is both your attack roll and the enemy's attack roll.
Yeah.
And so twice as much meaning or value is being placed on that die roll. And when I first did that, it's like, these dice throws are more exciting than rolling a d20 in Dungeons and Dragons because there's more writing on it.
Yeah.
And so what I thought was, what's the most I can get to write on a single throw of the dice, right? Like, can I make that even more powerful? And what I like about this, the way that the mechanics work is, when someone goes to throw their dice, everybody stops and watches because that throw matters. And if they fail, then the thing that they're trying to do, they fail at. It's not just, well, I missed, but next round I'll get another chance, and we're going to throw dice until we have killed these monsters. And really the only question is, how long does it take, and how many of our one-time abilities do we have to use up to defeat the monsters?
Yeah.
This is like, oh no, you lost. You failed to win over the heart of the woman that you were after, and you did this whole big thing, but you rolled a 6 and you needed a 7, and now we're all sad for you, but she's gone off to join a cult where sex is not allowed, and you're out of it.
Changes the course of the whole story.
Changes the course of the whole story with that one throw of the dice.
Yeah.
So it matters.
Yeah. That's important. It's very... There's the game aspect, the simulation aspect, as you had said. I think that's very fun. A lot of people really enjoy that.
Right.
But if you are looking for a narrative experience, that can get in the way of it. You know, for something like, I'm trying to tell this story, and not that I necessarily, you know, I want to tell the story of me trying to woo this person, and not that I think that I have to be successful every time, but I want my actions to have meaning, my choices to have meaning, my actions to have consequences. Yes.
Well, and I think like the part of that drama is the questions you're asking and the questions that you're interested in. You're interested in the question of whether I can woo this woman, and sometimes the mechanics get in the way. And one of the cool things about Over the Edge right now is that because you have this simple core lock casting that determines any fate at a very broad level, the mechanics never get in the way of the question you're asking, because the question you're asking is always what the mechanics are answering, because they are a perfect divination ritual.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, let's go into the future now, or into the recent past.
Yeah.
So the impressions now, and also the impressions for people who might have been fans, and it did change a lot, or for new people coming into it, how that's like similar or different to what it was like in '92. Yeah.
So I've got a lot of good feedback here at Gen Con from, right? People have come up and, hey, I've been a fan since whenever, this is really great. They really like the new system, because if you liked the old system, it meant you liked simple, straightforward, free-form rules, and this is simpler, more straightforward, more free-form, and so it just gives you what you want better. And, you know, I'm a better writer than I was then. I got, you know, right?
One hopes that one improves over time.
Right? So, like, I look back at the '92 version, and it's like, oh, this young fellow has promise. I can, you know,
right? That feels,
there's some good stuff in here. I can see where this guy's trying to do, and I don't know why that paragraph is in the, you know, I would cut that paragraph. There's nothing interesting in there. Right? So one of my rules was the second paragraph of content that you write on a topic may not be derivative of the first. Right? If I write that first thing about, like, this is a creepy hotel haunted by ghosts, and, you know, there's some creepy old woman that runs the whole thing by herself, but of course is not by herself because she has all these ghosts sort of helping her in the background. Of course. If that's the first paragraph, I don't have a second paragraph just talking about the ghosts and who they are and how people are afraid of the place because it's creepy. Because anybody could make that up based on the first paragraph. Any game master could take that first paragraph and figure out the derivative stuff.
Yeah.
So the second paragraph has to add something that you can't just derive from the first.
Okay.
And usually that's sort of a surprise, right? Which is what she doesn't know, is that one of these conspiracies is onto what she's doing and has wired all the halls or the walls and the floors or whatever with these ether net cables or whatever that are right ether
Yeah.
right that are slowly draining the power from the ghosts in order to power some of their own rituals. So it's got to add something new, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard work,
Yeah.
right? But what it means is the content is just jam-packed with ideas. You read the first paragraph, and when you read the second, it isn't just more of the same. I've written a lot of game content. I've read a lot of game content.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm tired of getting to the third paragraph and not having really learned anything new or anything that I could have just come up with myself based on that first one.
It's like, and these dragons, they have scales
Yeah,
and breathe fire.
exactly. And the people are afraid of them. It's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, this is not a small book.
It's also
So
not a
this,
small book.
Packed with content.
Yeah, that's right.
On each page and a lot of pages in
Yeah,
there.
that's right.
So you mentioned briefly the GM experience.
Yes, that's
if you
right.
want to talk a little bit more about what it is like for someone to
Sure.
master this game.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the first things that I learned is the action goes fast. So with the old system, I could make up just a little bit of stuff ahead of time, and the dice throwing mechanics would take enough time that, okay, this would be like 3.5 hours worth
Yeah.
of content. But now the dice throw mechanics are so fast, right? It's
Yeah.
like we get 2 hours in, and it's like, oh, we have completed a 3.5 hour adventure in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Which on the one hand is good, but on the other hand, we've got another hour and a half. So I've had to do a little more work when I do adventures or prepare plots and scenarios because the characters are going to go further, right?
Yeah.
But then the other thing that I do is I give a lot of coaching to the game master on how to play. There's a lot of the material in here is for the game master,
Okay.
right? Conceptually what to do, here's some content that you can use, there's rules of what to do and what not to do. Like for example, I say that for every character that you have at the table, you should invent some other character that is going to be relevant to them.
Okay. Yeah.
And it might be a character that the other character is going to immediately recognize, like they're here at the island for their long-lost brother, so you got to make up the long-lost brother. Or like in the case of the guy who wanted to woo the woman and failed, right? I put that woman in as like a fan of his self-help books that he was going to meet, right?
Yeah.
And then how was that gonna work, right?
Not well, apparently.
Could have worked well, could have worked poorly.
Yeah.
As the game master, I
Right.
don't know ahead of time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I get to find out. So, like, I put in, this person is going to be a rival. This person is going to be a potential friend, but you never know. This person is going to be an enemy, but could also has another enemy in common. So maybe it'll be enemy of my enemy. And then those characters are designed to bring out whatever the players have already brought to the table. And I sort of stole that from Luke Crane in Burning Wheel. And when I read it in Burning Wheel, like he said, if you've got a character who always follows what fire priestesses do, then you should come up with a fire priestess to put them on the spot. And when I read that, it's like, that sounds like cheating. Right? Like, you're using that guy's flaw against them. That's not fair. And, well, now it's my idea, and I think it's great that I wrote it in here. It's
No,
like,
it's fine.
hey, you know what you should do?
Yeah.
You should whatever. And boy, no, he was right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it, what's fun about running this is you have some kind of idea maybe of what you're going to do. Like, we're going to do a story arc about the rise and fall of the Museum of Modern Life, and these are the sorts of things that are going to happen, and this is the sort of ending that it could come to one way or another. But then the players are going to bring their own creativity, and then the game master is going to react to that with stuff they never would have come up with.
Yeah.
And so you end up with things that you never would have imagined on your own.
So would you say that it's tends to be more improv-y, that the game masters have to think on their feet a little bit more?
A lot of it that sure helps, right?
Yeah.
Like the characters can go anywhere on this island, right? Like it's not a dungeon where you know which rooms they're going to go into next. They can get on the metro and go wherever they want, right? So you do have to improv stuff, but I coach you to invent stuff ahead of time so that, right? Like I had these list of characters that somewhere along the way, these are the characters that are going to come in, so that when I do an improv, my improv is pulling something that I have prepared and throwing it into the scene in a way that maybe I hadn't thought of before. And so you do enough preparation ahead of time that when you go to improv, you've got stuff to pull on.
Yeah.
I actually had an acting teacher who once said that 90% of improvisation is preparation.
Oh, yeah.
And that transformed me as a game master. Is that that makes sense. That it so much becomes easier because you have the tools ready to go.
Yeah, especially as an improver, you're doing all the games, you're doing all the practice, and then when it comes down to it, it's just completely natural.
Right, that you've got all this this toolkit that you have practiced and developed that you can pull on. Yeah.
So would you say this is more for an experienced game master, experienced players, or do you provide some help, like if you're completely new, if this is the first role-playing game you ever pick up, like for storytelling, for improving, for diving into it?
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's like a lot of performance art, is that the more you bring to it, the more you're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think experienced players and game masters are going to really be able to go wild with it. But I've done a lot of work over the years for beginners, beginner role-playing kits.
Excellent.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's been in my own work, or for Dungeons and Dragons and Pokemon and Magic I did beginner sets for. And so there's a lot of material in there about how to be a game master, how to use this material. And for the player, it's transparent enough that you hardly need to know anything, right? Like you don't need to know the system, you don't need to know the setting.
Yeah.
If you have role played a little but not a lot, you might have some limited ideas of what you're going to do, right? There's a lot of role playing out there that is, how do you minimize the damage you take and maximize the gold pieces that you find? And that's not what this game about, right? This is about what kind of trouble are you going to get into now, and what are you going to do when things turn crazy, right? And so a game master might be able to sort of help somebody get into the spirit of the game, but there's lots of examples for how to create a character, and I go through a long character generation example in here that's based on the player characters that we made in one of the story arcs in my own campaign. And so I was able to say, well, they came up with these ideas. We thought this idea might not work so well, so we talked about how to change it. And then during play, it turned out this is how it turned out, and this is how it developed, and then we really liked this. And so it shows that you approach all this stuff sort of intentionally. You like, why are you giving this character this trait, right? And so, like a lot of people, when they think about what their character's trouble will be, they'll be something like, I get angry when my honor is questioned. Okay, everyone gets angry when their honor is questioned. And what kind of fun is that? You're going to get in fights, like that's not, I'm too curious for my own good, like that's going to lead you all sorts of weird places, right? Like, or, I can't say no to a dare, right? Or,
I like that one.
There's a great one which is like, I take it to 11, right? So you're at a party where weird things are happening, and it's like, okay, now super weird things are going to start happening, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really great for beginning players, and I think even beginning game masters are going to find lots of help to get them to bring out what's really cool about the game.
Yeah, I love that, the examples, because I think I'm fairly new to role-playing games, only been doing it for a couple of years. And like when I started, I was with a very experienced group, and we're doing the things, and I was very quiet. It was also digital, so it's a little tougher for your first experience.
That's right.
And the situation would happen, and I'd be like, well, I feel like I don't know what to do. Well, they're like, well, do whatever. Just like, what would your character do? I'm like, but how do I do what my character
Right.
would do? Or like you're creating a trouble, you know? It's like,
That's right.
Yeah.
So you've agreed ahead of time on what are the kinds of things that you're going to have your character do.
Yeah.
You've thought about it ahead of time. That's part of your character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we can look through the book real quick.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. So there's a beautiful map of the
yeah.
city and all these little. It's divided into districts that are all really different from each other. So the super rich district and the weird university district and sort of the artsy district. And so you can go wherever you want in the game, and that sort of changes what your experience is going to be. There's a little bit that the character creation is relatively slim because there's not a lot of stuff, but lots of examples. So
Nice.
I'm a big believer in examples, and there's examples for everything. You can use those as lists. We have people like Chris and Cam would sort of throw in their own 2 cents, like, hey, I think this is the way to do it. And so they have their sort of called out their little pieces of information.
And real quick, you mentioned all the skills and things are created.
You're
by,
invented. That's
by
right.
the players.
That's
yes.
right.
Yeah. So it's not like I have a fireball or
That's
whatever.
right. That's
Okay.
right. So there's examples, and if you want to, you can just pull up from those examples and write them on your character sheet. But they are really for examples to guide you in inventing your own stuff. And so, like here's a picture of people playing chess, but I don't know, that guy's got a crustacean instead of a chess piece, and it's all like these weird pieces.
Yeah.
And again, this is what's great about making it in the modern world is these are just 2 Joes in a park playing chess, but that's not chess.
Yeah.
Right? So now, what does that even mean? So here are the rules, and basically the stuff that I talked about, the good twists and bad twists and whatever, is all right there. Long examples after examples of paranormal activity and how to handle it. A little bit on character advancement, but that's it. The character creation and rules are simple. Here's sort of the basics on, they call it the ultimate democratic republic of Alamarja, because the more good words you have in front of something, the worse your country is.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is sort of an overview, and it's maybe stuff that players would know, and it gives you sort of a top-down view on what things are. And the favorite sport there is fighting, right?
Fighting.
And if they try to
Yeah.
do some other kind of sport, it usually ends up as fighting.
Fighting.
Right? And so they just, we'll just cut to the chase and we'll just fight.
Yeah.
Weird drugs, that's always been part of the setting, and all sorts of things that you can try. And then this is specifically about the city, so it goes into you got all these different districts, so you can control what kind of experience you have by, we're just going to do this in the science district, we're going to do this in the district of gold, or whatever. And so this is where you're getting into the sort of the public content. This is the kind of stuff that you would experience if you went to the Temple of the Divine Experience or Ahmed's Quick Clinic, right? A lot of this stuff has guidelines for how to turn it into stories and into conflicts. And then once you get through sort of the public stuff, now you're getting into what I call the last war, because everyone knows that the world is coming to some sort of horrific conclusion, right? There's some, like life is going to be ultimately transformed or destroyed in the near future, and we can all kind of see that coming. So this is the paranormal, and all the, these are the gangs and organizations that are kind of public. Like the Baboon gang sort of runs security in one of the districts, and the Aries gang runs it in another. These are the hallucinating ants that from the Cretaceous period, of course, right? So there is actually a history that goes back, into prehistory and the Cretaceous era. The Kerguelians are the weird psychic aliens that come from another place. I forget I said that. You've never heard of them. So now this is all sort of the secret stuff, and then we get into the back here, like here's the museum I was talking about, and this is where this is stuff that is not part of the setting yet, but you can make it part of the setting if you want, and this is how to put it all together. Here are game master characters you can use over and over again. So like in D&D, you always fight kobolds, and in Over the Edge, you often run into Buck Williams, and every time that you play a new story arc, maybe Buck Williams is going to show up again, but in a sort of a different spin or a different skin and role or something like that, right? And so then there's a whole bunch of stuff on helping your players create characters and running your first campaigns, how to prep, right? Because that's one of the things that I had to learn, right?
Yeah.
How to improvise content. Here's The Sun Queen Must Die. It's a really cool introductory adventure. So,
great.
right?
Yeah.
Helps people just get right in off the off the bat, and there's a really creepy picture of a guy in a bunny outfit, right? It's just like you don't want to look at that picture too long.
And yet that's the picture we stayed on for the longest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right? And here is, these are 4 characters that are all sort of lined up in columns. It's everything you need to know about every character. So as a player, I can see everybody else at the table and what all their characters are capable of. So I can riff off them. Hey, I remember that your trouble is that you're a risk taker.
Oh,
so
nice.
now when
Yeah,
I,
like
as a
that.
player,
Yeah.
I have my character meet yours, I will give you some risks to take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wow, that was very in-depth. It was super fun. We have a couple of minutes left, so if there's anything, you had mentioned supplements,
Yep.
anything about the future, so real quick, if you want to tie it up together, and also where to get this as well,
Right.
would be great.
Absolutely. Well, you can find, we'll start with that.
Yeah.
Over the Edge 3rd edition can be found in your local game store. It can also be found at atlas-games.com. We have an online store there.
Okay.
But we really do encourage people to go to the local game store and support the local game stores. We do want to support this and give GMs all kind of really awesome new tools to work with. So we have our first supplement in that line is coming out this fall. It's called Welcome to the Island. It's going to be a collection of 5 adventure scenarios written by multiple award-winning authors. And like I was mentioning earlier, like how Jonathan gives permission for everyone to transform the island. The cool thing about writing scenarios for Over the Edge is that they can take big risks, and the consequences, whether they succeed or fail, will mean that the world is completely changed in these scenarios. Another one of my favorites from there is we're doing a scenario called At the Terminal. As Jonathan mentioned, a lot of characters, when they show up, they just fly into the island, and they and the players are experiencing it for the first time. It's a very strange terminal, built according to some non-standard and perhaps unorthodox principles. And what this scenario does is actually more of a toolbox like everything else, where every time someone shows up, you can revisit the scenario, pick up different tools, and build a unique quest, path, soul journey through
soul
the terminal
journey,
as they
yeah.
attempt to escape out into the island which waits and beckons them. So we're very excited about what that's going to bring. We'll be looking forward to more announcements in the future for stuff we're going to be coming out with in 2020. And as I am Atlas Games, our RPG producer, I can't do an interview right now without pimping our next RPG, which is kickstarting right now.
Oh, yeah.
It is called Magical Kitty Save the Day. Everyone gets to play a magical kitty, and every
I love
magical
it.
kitty has a human. Some humans think that they own the kitties, but I think we can all agree and know deep in our hearts that that is nonsense.
As a cat owner, yeah.
Yeah, that clearly, well, the cats own you.
As a cat owned.
Yeah, as a cat owned, yes. As one who the cat has deigned to allow to spend time with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So every magical kitty has a human, and every human has a problem. And so the magical kitties have to use their magical powers to solve the problems and save the day.
Excellent.
And it's going to be an all-ages RPG and a lot of fun.
All right, and that's on Kickstarter now.
That's on Kickstarter
check
now.
Check it out. Check out the atlas-games.com. Probably
That's
all
right.
the information is there.
Yep.
And to sign up, Atlas Games social media and the website to learn about future products as well.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing.
Over the edge, feng
Yeah.
shui to the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
All right. Wow, that is about all the time we have for today. Jonathan,
Thank you,
Justin, Atlas Games, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great segment, and I believe we have a little more going on, so stay tuned.
We have the last wrap up in the main. We're going to go over to the next channel.
All right,
As the
we're
wrap-up
wrapping
of the
up.
whole con.
Yeah, Gen Con is just about over, so stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for joining us.